It's the Week 4 preview show. Carson Fox here for Fox on West Virginia Mountaineers Sports, with the West Virginia Mountaineers coming in with a 1-2 record, hosting the Kansas Jayhawks, who come in with a 1-2 record as well. A noon kickoff Eastern time from Milan Puskar Stadium in Morgantown, West Virginia. If you're not able to tune into this game in person, going to be on ESPN2. The ESPN betting odds for this game, West Virginia favored 2.5 at an over-under of 57.5, so a little bit lower scoring than what we saw for the Backyard Brawl a week ago in Pittsburgh. And this game is just about a dead heat from the matchup predictor on ESPN.com at West Virginia, 50.6%, so practically even. Toss-up game matchup between Kansas and West Virginia. So let's talk about the matchup history before we get into the 2024 edition of this game that is much more hotly contested on the basketball court, especially over the last dozen years between the Jayhawks and the Mountaineers, especially in Lawrence, Kansas, or the Big 12 championship game. With West Virginia coming out on top more times, it seems like, than not in Morgantown. But the football matchups, it's really been one-sided, with West Virginia owning the 12 matchup record, 10-2, dating back to the team's first matchup in 1941 when WVU blanked the Jayhawks 21-0 at home. The only losses coming in 2013, West Virginia's worst team during its time in the Big 12 Conference on the road that year, 31-19 loss. And then, of course, 2 years ago, we can remember that game in Morgantown, a 55-42 loss in overtime. This was quarterback Jalen Daniels, then a redshirt freshman, his coming out party, passing for 220 yards and 3 touchdowns with 85 yards rushing. For West Virginia, it was behind then quarterback JT Daniels in week 2 after losing in the Backyard Brawl a week prior, 38-31, who passed for 365 yards and 3 touchdowns on the day. Led an 11-point comeback with 11 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, only to lose in overtime. After Kansas scored on the opening possession of the extra period on 3rd and 5 at the Kansas 20, down 7. Also, another young player for this upstart Kansas Jayhawk program, Kobe Bryant, cornerback, intercepted the pass intended for Bryce Ford Wheaton at the sidelines, ran it back 86 yards for the salt in the wound score. So don't see too many 13-point games that go into overtime, but that was the result in Morgantown. So still just a one-possession game that Kansas took away. And this has really been a Kansas program who, since that win, has been on the rise. Of course, last year, winning nine games, just like the Mountaineers had, Lance Leipold being considered one of the top coaches in the country, up-and-comers, deciding to stay with the Jayhawks, getting a nice extension. They're currently renovating a brand new football complex, putting a lot of money into it, wanting to be one of the premier programs of the Big 12 Conference. Now that Texas and Oklahoma are out of the league, of course, have an awesome basketball program. But Andy Kotelnicki, their offensive coordinator, did leave in the offseason to go to Penn State, as we talked about a lot of times with that Penn State matchup and both the preview and recap shows. So this is a team that's kind of now at 1-2 in flux. So what's on the line for both teams? Let's talk about the Mountaineers first. Obviously, going 1-0 in Big 12 play is the end-all be-all at this point in time, because this is now a brand new season for West Virginia, the first game of a 5-game stretch involving currently ranked or previously ranked opponents, with Iowa State jumping into the top 25, Arizona and Kansas falling out, but still, all of these programs that West Virginia is playing in over the next 5 weeks are, I feel like, top 40 teams. So this is the meat of, and then of course have UCF in the November stretch. So there's a lot for West Virginia to play, and it's all starting now. And again, you're heading into a bye week next week, so This is your one last opportunity in front of a home crowd, get a win instead of having a sour taste in your mouth of a loss heading into a bye week. Always feels much better, a get-right victory, go into the bye, and then come out stronger. So on the opposite side, let's look at it from, the other side of the coin. In a loss scenario for West Virginia, just adds more fuel to an already blazing fire for West Virginia to fire defensive coordinator Jordan Leslie and even perhaps head coach Neal Brown just 4 games into the 2024 season. That might be overstated. I've listened to enough podcasts over the last week, and I promise to try and give you my analysis, thoughts, and feelings for this show, taking the 3 games prior not fully into consideration. I guess what I mean by that is I don't want my sarcasm, cynicism, everything from last week of the Backyard Brawl, but also of these last 3 weeks, because I want to be positive. I want to be able to give you all a show in which you listen to it and it's like, oh, I learned some things, got some analysis here, I know what to expect going into this matchup, here's how West Virginia can win. Right now, I'm not really feeling that way. I'm not. For the first time really since I've started this channel, is I do not now feel good about any matchup West Virginia's walking into. And there is a lot to prove, starting with this week against Kansas, that can change, or it can get worse real quick, and then it can fall off like Mount Everest, or like you're looking over the edge at the Grand Canyon. And so that's what it is. This win, I think, means as much for this program as Baylor in 2022. I was at that game, another Thursday night kickoff, and that really terribly constructed 2022 season from a scheduling standpoint. West Virginia had 3 Thursday night matchups prior to Halloween, and at that point in time, West Virginia really needed that win on that Thursday night against Baylor in a 1-possession game. I feel like to really save Neal Brown's job the way the season was going. And I feel this same kind of way about this Kansas game. And I'm very curious to see how many West Virginia fans come to this game in person. It's going to be a beautiful day. Something I always like to talk about, the weather alert, perfect. 84-degree high, partly cloudy, no excuse from a weather standpoint. It's not going to be cold, rainy. Again, this is a perfect kind of day in Morgantown to go out and see a ball game, and I feel as if you already hadn't bought season tickets or a mini plan package, there will be a lot of tickets available. So very curious to see if West Virginia gets to 3 quarters full or beyond. I know it is Hall of Fame weekend. Doesn't really mean, it does, but doesn't really necessarily feel too much to the fan like, some of the, if this was a coal rush game. I really thought if both of these teams were coming into this matchup ranked, and again, also dependent upon the TV scheduling, if this was going to be a night game. But I really thought coming into this season that this was going to be the coal rush game. With the games kind of scripted from here on out of like what the themes were. I think you're not going to do it at homecoming. So it was like Kansas or Kansas State. I feel like we're going to be the opportunities for West Virginia to throw into this coal rush, and we're not getting that. We're getting a noon kickoff, a nooner. So that's what I got to say for what's on the line for West Virginia. Same kind of scenario I feel like for Kansas. Get right. Don't have a bye next week. They go through a stretch after this week of TCU, Arizona State, and Houston. So this win, right then and there, that could be a potential 4-0 out of Big 12 play for Kansas, given still a loss to Illinois, a loss to UNLV last week. But they could start out here 4-0 before a matchup against their in-state rival in Kansas State in October. So a lot on the line for both teams, as it always seems like in college football. Starting out right here in Big 12 play, that this is where things really get real, that with the college football playoff automatic qualifying bid for the Big 12 champion, this is where everything matters. So you can put the 1-2 non-conference records behind you to move forward in this game. So what do we watch for when Kansas has the ball? So again, slightly different. Still a lot of the same concepts, a lot of the same players involved from that 2022 matchup. Didn't get to see these two teams play a year ago without Andy Kotelnicki leading the offense for Kansas. But everything runs through quarterback Jalon Daniels, and he is the main reason why it seems like, well, with the kind of, I don't want to say inconsistent, but it just seems like ebbing and flowing offensive play calling through Kansas's 3 games. Lindenwood, who is a golf course right down the road from me here in Washington. So I was like, okay, the golf course has a football team. Never heard of Lindenwood before going into the season. But against Illinois, against UNLV, his interceptions have been critical. Redshirt junior quarterback Jalon Daniels, we talked about in that 2022 matchup, was masterful so far in the season. 39 for 71, only 71 passing attempts. 39 completions, 442 yards, so not what we expected. I mean, going into that 2022 season, Daniels was averaging 224 yards passing per game. This year, only at 147. He's got 3 touchdowns to 6 picks, 3 of them coming in that game against Illinois on the road. Did have 2 last week against UNLV. Does have 111 rushing yards on 21 carries, likes to run around a lot, and 2 rushing touchdowns. So he's a dual threat. He is the dual threat quarterback. It seemed like of this conference, yes, Shedeur Sanders may be the best quarterback in the Big 12 conference. But still more of a pure pocket passer, I would say, who has the ability to move. Daniels is going to want to try and kill you with his legs as well as his arm. And that's what he showed 2 years ago. And, not healthy in the back half of 2022. Missed a majority of the 23 season. And I don't know whether it's because of a young offensive line that has 2 freshman starters on its offensive lines, missing Kotelnicki, missing so much time over these last 2 years, stunting really his development. His QBR for the season is just 44, so below average for the year for Jalon Daniels. Just in the turnovers have just been the killer for Kansas in those 2 losses. So, but Kansas has arguably the best running back in the Big 12 conference. Ollie Gordon, yeah, I know, Heisman candidate, Doak Walker Award winner, amazing. But Devin Neal is right behind him. Had over 100 yards rushing a year ago, double-digit touchdowns this year, already off to a great start. 45 carries, 333 yards, that's a 7.4 yard per carry average, and averaging 111 yards per game with 2 touchdowns, and he did have a catch for 33 yards on the season. A senior, trying to build that draft stock profile, trying to be maybe like a day two pick in the 2nd or 3rd round. Got the size, got the speed combination. He can do it all, and he's got a pretty good backup behind him, a redshirt junior running back. That's Daniel Hishaw Jr. Also played a role in that 2022 upset for Kansas over West Virginia. Didn't play last week due to illness, but it sounds like he'll be back for this contest. 16 carries for 105 yards. So between Daniels, Neal, and Hishaw, Kansas has a stout rushing attack. And then the 3 senior wide receivers, who are arguably my favorite trio in this Big 12, from an outsider, as a West Virginia fan, looking at an outsider perspective. Yeah, I like some of the duos, and Tetairoa McMillan is the best wide receiver. I don't know. It's hard to pick between him and Travis Hunter. I mean, to tell you, 2 completely different types of wide receivers, I feel like, because of their size and stature. But, man, I really like McMillan from Arizona. But this trio from Kansas, the numbers are not going to pop off the page for you. Given Daniels' struggles with completing the ball this year, the way he's really spread it out. But Luke Grimm being their number 1 right now, Kind of like a 2 or 3. At 6 foot, 190 pounds, a senior, number 11, 18 receptions, 157 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I also like Lawrence Arnold, 6'3", 205. He might be there. Again, either of these three guys can be there. One, the way that the play design goes, how they work them. 10 catches, 131 yards, and a touchdown. And this is the big guy, number 0, senior, killed West Virginia 2 years ago. Quentin Skinner at 6'5", 190 pounds. Only 4 catches for 67 yards. Also sparingly used in the pass game so far this season, but, made a national name for himself 3 seasons ago at Texas, coming away with the game-winning reception in Jared Casey. Yeah, I mean, that long ago, he's still playing college ball, a senior, and still not, like, using his COVID eligibility in any, and, just 2 catches for 14 yards. So a good tight end. So there you go. You got 4 great pass catchers. You got 2 solid running backs. One in Neal, who could be a first-team All Big 12 running back by the end of the season. And you got Daniels. So Daniels' turnover troubles have been the killer and why this Kansas team is 1-2. And just so when I look at it from a defensive perspective for West Virginia going into this matchup, I'm looking at 2 sides of the same coin. And again, I have to give you both the skeptic perspective now, and I have to give you the optimist perspective. I want to give you the optimist perspective, thinking like, I've done my research. We are going to get what we expect out of this West Virginia team with all of the preseason hype that it had, with all of the talent that it had up and down the roster. But, the skeptic in me now, with a Neal Brown-led team that's 1-2, and a Jordan Leslie-led defense, is that this is going to be Jalon Daniels' get-right game. He's going to manipulate the linebackers in the RPO game with his legs like he did in 2022 and bomb the ball downfield against West Virginia's weak secondary that's given up over 300 yards passing in back-to-back weeks. One against Miles Burkett of Albany and Eli Holstein, who is just coming into his 3rd start for Pitt. The optimist in me, and what I hope for in this contest, is that West Virginia can use the same game plan that it did against Pitt, and if lightning doesn't strike twice in a week span, West Virginia will be all right. It will give up points, undoubtedly, because this Kansas team, from a talent perspective, is much more loaded. I mean, those 3 receivers alone in Grimm, Arnold, and Skinner are better than Pitt's 3 top receivers. Neal's better than Desmond Reed. Hishaw is better of a number 2 running back than anything Pitt had. So it's kind of a push between, I feel like, Holstein and Daniels. Daniels, showing 2 years ago that he was coming into 2023 as the Conference Player of the Year pick. But so far through 3 games in 2024, he's looked below average. Kind of a guy I feel like is on the precipice of getting benched. Maybe trying to do too much, trying to impress the NFL draft scouts too much, just being too aggressive, needs to just take what he's given and move the ball downfield. But if I'm West Virginia, after having an awesome day last week of creating pressure, if you can find ways to get him down to the ground in comparison to an Eli Holstein, who's 6'4", 230, 40 pounds, versus a Jalon Daniels, who's only like 6 foot, 205. If you don't piss down your leg on 2nd and 30 from 40 yards out, that I think West Virginia can do all right. But again, it's yet to prove this. It's yet to put everything together, from especially a secondary perspective. I have no idea who's going to be able to cover these 3 wide receivers. I know that Neal Brown said in his earlier in the week press conference that West Virginia is going to have to give some opportunities to some new guys out of the bullpen. That doesn't make sense to me. Why do you bring in... I get it. You shouldn't reward bad behavior, lack of production, that kind of thing. But you spend all this money considering Garrett Hollis Jr. is your cornerback 1. Why would you bench him when you're going into this stretch now against your most talented? Do you just want to lose? I don't know. I mean, I guess I always live and die by, you fight your toughest battles with your strongest soldiers. And if he's not performing like a top cornerback, then I understand you got to continue to try. But I feel like he's still one of the best. Just work out of this funk, and maybe maybe he gets right. Who is going to go against Quentin Skinner? Who is a big enough? Is Hayden Garnes going to go up against Quentin Skinner? I'd love to see Jacoby Spells here. I'd love to see Jacoby Spells get involved more if he's feeling closer to 100%. Getting a bye week next week, I kind of wish, like it's bordering on this range where it's, do you want to use a year's worth of eligibility, when you can only play 8 games maximum? He's in his junior year. Really didn't get used very much last year. Sparingly as a freshman, but enough that he used a year of eligibility, doesn't have a red shirt, so he is a true junior. If you're going to try and work him in, he's coming up close on that 4 games. Can he give you a full go? Is he finally healthy to give you a full go? Or are we going to have a Charles Wood situation all over again? So TJ Crandall, being a guy who apparently Neal Brown and Jordan Leslie are like, we got to give more opportunities to him here. Dontez Fagan and Hayden Garnes just aren't getting it done. Couldn't get it done last week against Pitt. So I don't know from this kind of and the other thing that I really didn't like from that Monday press conference, and really thought about making like a show out of this, but I was just still am so disgusted at this coaching staff. I didn't want to make a whole video on just like my anger. Outside contained by the defense. Like, he was so praiseworthy. Like, you gotta listen through the BS now with Neal Brown on everything that he says, from the Monday press conferences to the United Bank Playbook show that he does on Twitter with Tony Caridi, to his Thursday Kegler shows. Like, he does a lot of talking and a lot of generalities that I think, just because he was so different from Dana Holgorsen, during his early years, you understood where he was coming from. Benefit of the doubt. He plays a really good politician, it seems like, sometimes, in saying all the things that you should hear, but like then when it comes time for you to actually show it and do it, he's been sporadic. I felt like did some really good things in 2023 to help in this regard, but like, I think it was something I caught during this press conference on Monday when he was so praiseworthy against the pressure that West Virginia was being able to create. But he was like, but we have to remain to be able to have outside contain. We cannot lose outside contain. And I was thinking to myself, like, that's it. That is conservative Neal Brown defense. We talk so much about conservative Neal Brown offense and how that's ruined so many games over his 6 years. Now we're getting conservative Neal Brown defense a little bit, because I do feel as if he has abdicated a lot of responsibility, like Dana Holgorsen did with Tony Gibson, in giving Jordan Leslie really the autonomy to be the head coach of the defense. So Leslie has to answer, it seems like, for a lot of the defensive consequences, good or bad. But Neal Brown is saying, like, oh, we got to keep outside. So that's what Neal Brown would like. On an average play call, when West Virginia's on defense, he would honestly just like it if TJ Jackson on one side and then on the other side, Sean Martin play patty cake with the left and right tackles. Don't let the quarterback get outside or, anything like that. And then same with this spur bandit that does not create enough pressure over these last 6 years to just sit and wait. As I've said many a times over this, since I've started this channel, West Virginia's defense is way too reactive and not proactive. They don't send enough pressure, and then they just sit in and wait on their laurels in zone coverage and wait for someone to make a play. And that's not good enough. Like that at the Power 4 level, especially when you're playing against really good opponents, you have to dictate terms. That is what, and it's like, because you don't have enough faith in your players to be able to do so. If so, how condemning is that against the recruiting and this structure, the scheme and everything, for years now? is that West Virginia, what, are we just going to sit back, drop 8 into zone coverage and let these quarterbacks and wide receivers try and pick you apart? Like, that's not good enough. You can't rush just 3 and really their real responsibilities is just outside contained. They're really like sitting in zones practically. Like, that's not good enough. I think I get where he's going with this. Like, you can't have drives like you had last week in which Eli Holstein manipulates out the pocket and has 4 rushes of 10 yards or more in the day, and the way that he was able to run and killed you over those last 2 drives that Pitt scored. But I feel as if watching West Virginia football enough, game after game, for the entire Neal Brown tenure, he just really means to say that, like, West Virginia needs to sit back and be reactionary rather than be so super aggressive that you leave yourself exposed for those kinds of plays. I'm sorry, but that's just not the way I feel like people should play defense. Yes, it's on these secondary, defensive backs in the secondary to play better man-on-man or even in a zone against the ball. That you need to be better, reactionary. And that, like, maybe this speaks to why West Virginia has struggled to force turnovers in the last few years, is that they sit back in zone and wait for the play to come to them rather than them come to the play. And you got some guys who can rush the passer. Like, what is the freaking point of Ty French if you're not going to, like, send him after the quarterback? Instead, you want him to This is what I critiqued against Jarrett Bartlett last year, is I felt like Jarrett Bartlett was a half-decent player, just wasn't given the opportunities within his position to be able to go out there and do what he does best. Tyron Bradley's practically been non-existent for 3 games. Ty French also unheard of. So, like, do not be afraid to create chaos, to rush the passer, continue to do what you were doing, in that Pitt game, come between the A and B gaps, rush after Jalen Daniels. And if he's able to escape with his legs, then, clap and so be it and move on to the next play. But this team needs to play pissed off. This defense needs to play with, like, it should be organized chaos, is the oxymoron that I've heard so frequently, from not only, pundits or commentators, but coaches themselves, is that, again, dictating terms to the opposing offense, understanding in your scouting, in your game plan, kind of what they want to do and how you can best attack them. But to play namby-pamby, like, sit back on our heels and let them come to us, like, that's just not good enough. That's not it. That is not the kind of scheme that reflects West Virginia as a, blue collar, work hard. And even though I've said before in this program that I feel like West Virginia throughout its decades has been more offensively minded than defensively minded, like, it's not to cut your nose off to spite your face and only care about one side of the ball on offense, that the defense could come needs to come out there, rush the passer, hit hard. You can criticize Tony Gibson and Jeff Castile in this 3-3-5 scheme of the last 20 years, and I have, and I talked about that in the offseason. But I think Jordan Leslie's just taken it to a whole new level, that when he calls for blitzes, just ill-advised or ill-timed blitzes, or or just not enough. Like the times in which they call for a blitz, and it's very few, just don't work. So then he gets scared, then he hesitates, and it's like, we're not going to blitz anymore. We're going to drop everybody into coverage, and again, we'll give the quarterback enough time to wobble around, wide receivers to get open, find open places in the zone. And these quarterbacks and wide receivers, because of their development in 7-on-7s throughout their times in high school, are so much better in 2024 than even they were in 2004 or 2020 or 2014, that they know how to find areas in zone coverages. And even, man on man. And West Virginia, is so afraid to go man on man of being afraid to get burned over deep. So that's what I have to say, I guess, about offense to defense. Let's talk about West Virginia when it has the ball against Kansas's defense. Kansas's defense is only allowing 246 yards per game so far and 16 points per game. So if you look at that, I know the opponents, Illinois, now being ranked, UNLV, G5 program, but one of the best, G5 programs in terms of offense. But that's still pretty good. They have two lockdown corners, two guys who are like all Big 12 considerations, and Kobe Bryant and Mello Dotson come in total with 3 pass breakups. Dotson does have an interception return for a touchdown from that Lindenwood game. So, kind of afraid, given West Virginia's struggles at its wide receiver positions, of creating separation or some of its play designs and creating that separation that it needs to succeed. I don't know necessarily if this is the day to try and test these guys, given the kind of confidence that you're lacking offensively because of the 1-2 record. Now, you did some nice things offensively at times in that Pitt matchup, but Kansas's defense is better than Pitt's defense. Opponents only averaging 3.1 yards per carry on the ground. Now, Kansas did give up 124 rushing yards on 19 carries by UNLV quarterback Matthew Sluka a week ago. So is there an opportunity for Garrett Green to run if they're going to lock down at the cornerback some of these wide receivers and send them deep? It might be an opportunity for Garrett Green to make Kansas pay on this day. Kansas also had an awkward 27-yard touchdown pass allowed right before halftime in that UNLV game. So at times they're super focused, and then there's times where they just lack some focus. And maybe like a case in point with this is that opponents go on these really long drives against Kansas's defense. I watched both their games against Illinois and a little bit last week against UNLV. And here's a case in point: the go-ahead drive for UNLV's offense against Kansas's defense went 19 plays and used almost 10 minutes in the fourth quarter worth of game time. So if West Virginia can sustain drives, continue to pick up first downs, by any which way, I don't care, over the ground, on the ground, through the air, or penalties, continue to sustain drives against this Kansas defense, I think they are more susceptible in the run game maybe than the numbers express it so far through 3 games. And West Virginia did, especially once C.J. Donaldson got involved into the game last week, took it to Pitt. So I think that getting both involved, I don't think there's anything from a run game standpoint that you need to necessarily change up against Kansas that you schemed and tried to execute against Pitt a week ago. It's just, don't want to have any kinds of, days like a Kobe Bryant or a Mello Dotson just jump the pass in front of some of these wide receivers. And, if you're turning the ball over, Garrett Green needs confidence, needs to be able to keep drives moving any which way. And once he starts to be able to gain confidence, that's when you feel a little bit more comfortable. And just the way that Neal Brown conservatively called that offense, especially in the first half against Pitt last week, I feel as if he's going to try and do that again. Not put Garrett into situations in which he needs to test these corners. I think maybe that leaves an opportunity for Cole Taylor over the middle of the field in the tight end game. Or just trying to work, again, create some more pass concept and route running opportunities for these wide receivers, so that if they can't necessarily create separation from a route running standpoint, that you got some fast guys. You got Day Farmer, you got Traylon Ray, you got Rodney Gallagher. Can use some drags across the field, use some slants, use some crossing patterns. Just we don't see enough of that. We didn't see enough of that a week ago against Pitt. And I just think I'm really going to be watching how West Virginia attacks this Kansas defense and trying to sustain drives this week. So, opportunity for Garrett Green to run the ball, I feel like. I don't think we necessarily see a huge day passing the ball, and that's okay. Looking again over these next 5 matchups, like there's going to be an opportunity against Iowa State. There's going to be again an opportunity, I feel like, even against Arizona. So if you're a little bit more concentrated in this matchup of taking care of the ball and not trying to be too aggressive and turning the ball over in precarious situations, then like I'm okay with that. But you got to be able to run the ball if that's the case. So special teams, I love talking about this. We got another Aussie punter matchup. Everybody will love it. Damon Graves for Kansas is a good one. 5 punts. 49.6 yard punt average, has a long of 58 on the area, has 3 punts actually of over 50 yards, does have a touchback. Ollie Straw did have the awesome fake punt run for a first down a week ago against Pitt. 8 punts, a 44.6 yards per average, does have a long of 57, 1 over 50 yards, 4 inside the opponent's 20-yard line. So while the average might not necessarily as long, Straw has been punting with shorter fields. So being a little bit more conscious with field position, those coffin corner kicks, like I'm okay with that. From a punt return standpoint, finally saw a good effort last week. Preston Fox had a 14-yard return. Now he's up to just 8 yards, an 8-yard average on 4 returns. Not much to be said by Trevor Wilson the other way for Kansas, who does both the punt returning and the kickoff returning for Kansas. And the punt returns 3 for the year for 22 yards, had a long of 15. Doing the kickoff duties, he's had 6 for a 20-yard average at a long of 28. Traylon Ray just a tick below that, 5 returns for an 18-yard average, also a long of 28. And also the kickers, pretty evenly kicking matchup here. Alan Tabor from Kansas, a senior kicker, 3 for 3 field goals. It's a long of just 41 on the season, has missed an extra point. 10 of 11 for the year. Michael Hayes, perfect on his extra points as he did last year in Morgantown. I love that. 4 for 4, perfect on field goals with a long of 44. So that's your offense, defense, and special teams matchups. Let me give you my 3 keys to victory, I feel like, and my prediction, and we'll walk this show out. So love to hear have your comments here on YouTube so far. If you've liked this video so far through 37 minutes, hit that like button so more Mountaineer fans can see this across YouTube. And if you haven't already, love to have you as a subscriber as we get into Big 12 play, and we have a lot to talk about down this stretch. So my 3 keys to victory, again, I think number 1, this transcends everything, is that West Virginia needs to play with the type of intensity and mentality in which fans like me are going to bring into Milan Puskar Stadium on Saturday. Is that there is an angst, there is a annoyance, I don't know what to say. Let that be an inspiration for how you play to prove it. I mean, if you want to say, whether I always like to say, prove the people who believe in you right more so than the people who doubt, and making the people who doubt in you believe wrong, because they never believed in you in the first place. But you got to do both in this situation. Having a short memory, I guess, even though I have scars very deep from that backyard brawl loss a week ago, it's kind of for the players. It's like, it's just a new day of football. The past is in the past, as Rafiki would say from Lion King. Go out there. You got 60 minutes worth of game time, a 3.5, 4 hour time period. If you only get 12 of these Saturdays a year to go out there and play, one of these being at Milan Puskar Stadium, your opening Big 12 play, and this is a team in Kansas that's kind of like at the edge of the knife, just like you are. So play to win, not to lose, and go out there and just take the intensity of the fans out there, hit hard, block hard, play hard. I don't know how to just there's just this lack of aggression that I've just watching some recaps, watching some highlights, some games from over the years, that even though this West Virginia team is very talented, and it might just be the evolution of the game these days, where it almost plays more like basketball than truly football, of what I feel like fans experienced in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s with the evolution of the spread read option and the RPO, is that games are played in so much space nowadays that it doesn't matter who you're playing is running the spread read option. Especially at the collegiate level, not so much the high school level, and the pro levels all over the place. So it's less on sometimes the physicality and more so the finesse, but you got to have your physicality where you need it. Again, with creating the pass rush, with breaking up passes in the secondary, of course, getting a push up front on the offensive line. And then whenever working through defenders from a yards per contact standpoint. I thought it was a great stat. I'm missing it now. I saw it on my phone earlier. West Virginia had over 100 yards after contact rushing last week against Pitt. That's phenomenal. I know C.J. Donaldson plays a part of that. That's what he can do for you, is if these Kansas defenders play weak out there and don't want to make business decisions and bring him down to the field, make him pay. And Garrett Green, even though I feel like he's not 200 pounds soaking wet, that he can go out there and, again, take care of your body, but play physical and tough. And he showed that in that Penn State game. Week 1, we had one of those rushing attempts where he burst through 2 defenders for an extra yard to pick up a first down, so be tough. That is the kind of mentality, just like West Virginia brought against UCF last year on the road in Orlando. That's the kind of physical mentality and play that I want to see. And I think that can permeate through offense, defense, and special teams if you bring it. Bring it. Do not have that hangover effect that West Virginia had in 2022 when it lost to Pitt. Came in, I don't know if it was necessarily a sense of entitlement or looking down upon Kansas. It's Kansas. We can beat them. Doesn't matter how we prepare. I don't think there's probably that mentality this week in practice. Getting ready for this matchup. This isn't your granddad or even, the Kansas of old. I know they had one good year there in 2008, but this isn't the bottom-dwelling Kansas anymore, even at 1-2 still. So can't take them lightly. Have to play pissed off, play to win. Defensively, force a dang turnover, please. You're going against a guy who's thrown 6 picks, one against a team named Lindenwood. Go out there and catch the ball when it hits you in the hands. And if he throws into double, triple coverage, do not let the wide receivers catch it at least, if you can't come away with an interception. But through 3 games, nada, y'all. Nada. That's not good enough. That's bad. And that is you had a pick 6 opportunity the other way, Dantes Fagan, last week in the backyard brawl. Capitalize on those in this matchup. Otherwise, it's going to be a very, very long season if West Virginia can't play more aggressively and force turnovers. And I know they're trying this trial by fire with all of these different cornerbacks. And it's like, okay, we're throwing you out there, TJ Crandall. We're throwing you out there, Jacoby Spells, healthy or not. Rodney Gallagher, you've never played in the secondary at the collegiate level. Now we're 3 games in, or 4, now in the 4th game, we need you. You're our starting nickelback or something like that. I just can't believe we're talking about this. With this team, but starting there, get a turnover this week, please. It's been 80 years. Force a turnover, please. Offensively, I said, can you get more creative with your play calling, Neal Brown? Please. That was terrible in the first half against Pitt. Go out there. And if you need to establish the run first, I get it, because you don't want to test these corners. But again, get creative with your play calling so that you can force them in the things that they don't necessarily want to do. Again, with some pre-snap, moving them across the field, running drag routes across the field, running those crossing patterns. So maybe, I've seen this enough across college football through 3 weeks of defenders running into each other, or it's almost like basketball that you're using a wide receiver against a defender and pick plays. Like, can you do more of that? Or target the middle of the field with Cole Taylor, trying to get more creative with your play calling rather just HB dive, throw an out route to Traylon Ray on third down. Like, get more creative with your play calling. I think if that's the case, I think if West Virginia forces turnovers, I think it takes care of the ball, but also is be able to do some things creative and score points and play with the physicality that you need, I think West Virginia can win. And that's why I called it in the preseason. I'll stick with it, even despite losing that backyard brawl last week, losing against Penn State in the fashion that it did week 1. I think West Virginia can go out there, I'll say 31-28. I think because this is at home makes a huge difference. Playing on the road, this team reeling right now, doesn't need a road matchup. I think I said during my prediction show that I feel like this was the game that would tell where the fork in the road at where the season would potentially go. I thought this game and the Arizona game might be 2 games that people, the national media or even Vegas saying West Virginia is going to lose, but I had good feelings about that they could potentially win. That the talent could have been even. It's such enough positions that if West Virginia could close in the final minutes, and that's a big if. That's a big if. That's exactly what I crucified West Virginia for in that Pitt game. So why do I have any confidence that West Virginia can do all of these things I talked about and at the end of the day close and come out with a victory? It must just be, my heart. My heart over my head in this situation, and feeling as if West Virginia doesn't win against Kansas, it could get real ugly, and then this season goes on down the tubes. So maybe this is just me being a hopeless romantic here, and instead we're going to be seeing Kansas and Jalen Daniels looking like Patrick Mahomes all over the field, throwing to these wide receivers, getting it exactly right, and West Virginia gets blown out. But if that's the case, I'll come out on Sunday and I'll give you exactly exactly what happens and exactly the things that we talked about from this show. So I don't feel good. I don't feel confident. I'm just once again nervous. Going to be eating my peanuts on Saturday and nerveless in my nervousness. So how are you feeling about this matchup? Do you think West Virginia can win? Do you think the reasons that I've talked about during this show, you can see the way in which West Virginia can win? Love to know your thoughts, good, bad, or indifferent. Leave them here on YouTube. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. And I'll be back on Sunday to talk about it. Let's go. Hail West Virginia.